All right, so good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and I know we do have a bunch of you that fits the bill for, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And today, of course, is Earth Day. It's a very special day for talking about the environment, for conservation and biodiversity across the globe. So thank you so much for spending it with us. In just 1 hour, we go live with Nicole Rycroft, who is the director of Canopy, which is an amazing organization. Last hour, we went to the Friends of the Rouge watershed in East Toronto to do a live virtual tree planting. And now we've got our most popular program of the day. We are joined at the Duke Lemur Center. So I know we've got a bunch of groups in Ontario today where we all know it's a little bit chillier than we'd expect here in late April. Well, that applies down the eastern seaboard as well. And so North Carolina is a little bit colder than we would expect. So I'm trying not to have lemurs become popsicles live on camera. We are going to do a bit of a presentation today highlighting the amazing work that the Duke Lemur Center does. I'm really excited to bring in Megan McGrath, who is the education manager for all the amazing work they do there. Megan's going to blow your minds for 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to dive in with a really fun Q&A with all you guys. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us, and take us away.
Hi, thank you so much. Sorry, something just fell over in my office, but we're all good. So as Jesse mentioned, it's a little chilly for the lemurs today, so we are not going to be out in the forest. Technically, I can still go out into the forest and maybe show you some squirrels. I might even find a turtle or something, but if we want to see lemurs, we're going to use our video. We have lemurs free-ranging here at the Duke Lemur Center for most of the year, but April can be a little dicey with North Carolina weather, so it dipped almost to freezing temperatures last night, which is a little too cold for our lemurs, and it's going to dip down there again tonight. So they're staying nice and snuggly and warm inside overnight, which means no time out in the forest. But don't worry, the video we have of them is actually even cuter, in my opinion, sometimes than live sessions. So you'll still get to see plenty of great lemur content. So my name is Megan. I've been here at the Duke Lemur Center for almost 5 years now, and I've been working with wild animals and teaching people all about them for over 10 years now. So I was obsessed with animals as a kid, didn't realize you could make a career out of just telling people weird facts about them, and now here I am. All right, so a little bit about the Duke Lemur Center for those who aren't familiar. We are in Durham, North Carolina. We are part of Duke University. We're on about 100 acres of Duke's campus out in the Duke Forest area, so lots of natural area. And we have 3 main branches to our mission. We are a non-invasive research facility, so that means we don't do anything harmful or hurtful to the lemurs or anything that would cause them long-term discomfort. Participation is usually voluntary in research, or it's part of their routine care or veterinary care. We also have a conservation branch of our mission. We've been working on the ground in Madagascar with Malagasy partners for over 35 years now. And we have the education branch of our mission as well. And something that spreads throughout all of those missions is our fossil division. So we also have a collection of over 35,000 fossils representing really important pieces of the primate evolutionary story. We've done some programs with the fossils for Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants as well that you can go back and check out. So I want to give a little introduction because lemurs are cute and they're cuddly and they're great with each other, but they're still wild animals, and we have to figure out where they fit in the wild animal hierarchy. So when we're talking about animals, we always group them together based on what is the most alike about them. So most primates have all of these characteristics. That includes all of us. That includes lemurs, that includes monkeys like these baboons. It also includes gorillas. So most of us share these traits. You can see we live in social groups. We like spending time around each other. And at the very least, we succeed better when we work together. That's a big thing with primates. We have long lifespans and long infancies, meaning that we spend a lot of time learning how to be a grown-up from our mom and dad. Humans are a really big example of that. We spend many years learning from our parents, and other primates spend at least a few years with mom and dad for the most part. We have relatively large brains. The relative part of that is really important because obviously an elephant has a gigantic brain, but an elephant also has a gigantic body. So we have to look at how big the brain is compared to how big the rest of the body is. And you can see that primates like this baboon, that's a pretty big brain compared to the little rest of the body. We also have grasping hands and fingernails, so we can grab and hold on to things using that thumb, which is opposable or at least semi-opposable for all primates. And then we have fingernails, meaning that our claws don't extend around our fingertip. We have fingernails just over the top, so we can still use our fingertips for lots of important activities. And of course, we have forward-facing eyes. Forward-facing eyes give us depth perception, meaning we can tell exactly how far away something is. Easy way to test how important this is to you is to play a gentle game of catch with somebody and close one eye, and then you'll find out really quickly how much easier that is with both eyes looking forward. So now we have to talk about, more specifically, strepsirrhine primates. You'll also hear the word prosimian, which means pre-monkey, which would be referring to lemurs. They evolved before monkeys did, or at least their ancestors did. They evolved around 55 million years ago. But strepsirrhines is the more technically correct term, and it has to do with this word rhinarium. So strepsirrhine and rhinarium, that has to do with the nose. So lemurs have this elongated snout with this wet nose. So their nose looks more like a dog's or a cat's than it does a person's. That wet nose gives them a much better sense of smell. They have much better sensory receptors to smell, so they use a lot of scent communication, lots of scent marking, urine marking, that kind of thing, which you don't see as much with later primates. We use our other senses. You can also tell a strepsirrhine skull by looking at the eye socket. If you see a circle of bone, this is called a post-orbital bar, that tells you you're not only looking at a primate, but you are looking at a strepsirrhine primate. Or a prosimian. I believe this is how tarsiers' eyes look, and they're the odd man out. They also have a lot of nocturnal species. Most other strepsirrhines in the world, like the slow loris and the slender loris in Asia, or the bush babies in Africa, they're all nocturnal. In fact, the only diurnal strepsirrhines you're going to find are the lemurs living on Madagascar. And even there, you need a lot of nocturnal lemurs like these mouse lemurs here, which are literally the size of a mouse. They have grooming claws, that their second toe has a claw instead of a fingernail, so that they can use it to groom and catch all the places they can't clean with their tooth comb. This is the weirdest strepsirrhine adaptation. So they have their 6 teeth on the bottom are actually fused together and come out sideways, coming out towards their lip, so that they can use it just like you would use a comb or a brush through your hair. They use that tooth comb to kind of run their teeth right through their hair, get all the things out that they don't want there, parasites, bugs, that kind of thing. And of course, a big important thing for lemurs around here is that they are female dominant. Again, this is most lemurs, and the other one was most primates. We always have exceptions to every rule. So without further ado, I want to show you more of the lemurs here at the Duke Lemur Center. We didn't get to go out into the forest today, so I've got lots of great videos for you to see of the lemurs out in the forest, including this one, which shows how we get the lemurs out there and what it looks like if we were to go out there this morning when they were going out to get breakfast. So you're going to see Julie here. She is one of our primate technicians, animal care technicians, and she is heading out into the forest with a bucket of food for 3 different lemur species. We're going to see ring-tailed lemurs, we're going to see red-fronted lemurs, which is right down here behind the fence, and we're also going to see cockerel's shafak. So I'll narrate as we watch the video and introduce you to everyone. And there is no sound so that I can narrate. So you can see she's wearing a mask and gloves. This was taken after the COVID pandemic started, so she is taking extra precautions to make sure everyone is safe. And you saw the ring-tailed lemurs hopped out first. Now this is a cockerel's shafak right here. And then I took this video and I waited because we had a baby at the time. That's little Didius riding on his mom's back. That's Gisela. And then we're going to follow them down the path out of the building and out to their feeding site in the forest. So this is what we call a natural habitat enclosure, or we call it an NHE for short. And the lemurs in this forest have about 4 acres, I believe, that they can roam around in. And when they come out to breakfast, we want to see everybody and make sure they're all feeling okay. So we have a specific feeding site that we go to. And so you can see I'm watching and walking along with the shafak as they hop out to their feeding site. Cockerel's shafak move bipedally like we do, so they're 2-footed. They walk on 2 legs. but they don't quite walk. They actually hop, as you can see very clearly in the video a minute ago. So their hips are actually rotated outwards because they basically leap along from tree to tree and kind of hug and grab onto the tree as they leap between them. Now you're getting a good view of one of our red-fronted lemurs. That was Red Bay there. So our red-fronted lemurs are an elderly pair that lives out here, and they are a type of lemur. That's a genus of different related lemur species. And red-fronted lemurs are what's called sexually dichromatic. So the males and females actually look different in that species. So you can see Cardinal coming up. His face looks a little different as he hops up to join his mate, Red Bay, up here. And now you can see the cockerel shafak hopping over to their own feeding site. So you can see everyone has their own little area where they're eating. They actually get slightly different food too, because all these lemurs are from different parts of Madagascar. These cockerel shafak are from the northwest deciduous forests of Madagascar. Deciduous just means that the leaves fall off the trees when the seasons change. So that's actually just like what we have here in North Carolina and in a lot of North America. You have lots of trees that have the leaves fall when the seasons change. In Madagascar, you don't see as many evergreen trees. That's one of the bigger differences. So these big pine trees we have here are not something that the lemurs would have in Madagascar. But you can also see the diet pretty well here. So we've got different veggies in there. She's also probably diving in for her favorite part of the diet, which is going to be beans or nuts, depending on the protein they're getting that day. And you can see Didius is just kind of looking around as he rides on Mom's back and seeing what's going on. Didius is actually a whole year old now, but this was taken back when he was just a couple months old. So he was still very small and learning how to be a lemur. So he spent most of his time riding around on Mom's back. And we like to joke that this is the backpack stage, where they just ride around like a little pack on Mom's back, and they occasionally hop off, but then they'll hop right back on, especially if they get scared. So big question we always get is, okay, you have lemurs roaming around in the forest. How do you know where they're going to be? How do you keep them where they're supposed to be? How do you make sure that they come when they're called for breakfast? All of that. So let's skip ahead. Here is a great view of another building. So this is our indoor building where the lemurs get to go when it's a little too cold out. They have little outdoor yards they can explore. And then this fence right here is how we keep the lemurs where they're supposed to be. So you can see she's hanging out down here. This is another one of our cockerel shafak. I think this is Pompeia. And she's hanging out right down here on the fence. But up here is a net. And this net has a light electrical pulse that runs through it. It's not enough to hurt the lemurs, but it does feel really weird when they touch it. So the lemurs, when they're learning to come out into the forest, learn, ooh, that net feels weird. I'm not going to touch that net. I'm going to stay off of it. And we also make sure there aren't trees growing on either side of this fence, so the lemurs can't leap across trees over top of the fence, and they won't climb up and over because they know that net feels weird. And you can see a little video. She's actually going to do a little scent marking for you. Oh, I lied to you. This is Francesca, Pompeia's daughter. I can tell from the collar. That's a radio collar that helps us track where she is if she doesn't want to come for breakfast on a rainy, cold morning. Oh, you can see a little ringtail hopping underneath. And there's the scent marking. So lemurs like to rub their butts all over everything in order to mark it and say, this is my turf. So you can see she's very happy hanging out on the fence. Her mom's back here hanging out on the fence. Just so you know, if I were to point the camera the opposite direction, you would see trees and bamboo and forest. So the lemurs have the option to go into the forest, but they spend a kind of ridiculous amount of time up in their building too, because their building is a fun place where they get extra food and treats. And actually, I'll show you in just a moment how we get them to come back in from outside. So this is another video of Pompeia and Francesca. And this is their primary caretaker, Melanie. And she is doing what we call a lockup, where she practices bringing the lemurs in and getting them into one of our secondary enclosures. So this is for when it gets way too cold for the lemurs, just like it did the last couple of nights. And we want to make sure we're getting them inside and nobody's getting frostbite on their toes or tails. And so they voluntarily come back to us. And when they come inside their lockup areas, they get their extra favorite treats. So in this case, for our cockerel shafak, they get peanuts, which are their absolute favorite thing to eat. They love them. If we were trying to practice lockup with ring-tailed lemurs or those red-fronted lemurs, we would probably give them craisins or raisins, or we could just give them lots of nice fresh fruit. Depends on how much we really need them to come in and how stubborn they're being. So This is that same habitat you just saw, but from a different angle. So we're not looking at the fence and the building anymore. We're looking at the forest. And if you look really closely in the distance, you'll see Pompeia and Francesca coming. Melanie's actually doing 2 blows on a whistle as they're approaching. And so they know those 2 whistle tones mean, hey, it's time to come over for my favorite breakfast. You can see they're hopping along using that bipedal locomotion, hopping from tree to tree. We call this vertical leaping and clinging since they stay vertical while they leap horizontally. And this is that secondary enclosure I was talking about. So this is just an extra space inside of their forest habitat that we can use to make sure we can get them inside a nice enclosed space. And then from here, we can train them to come into a crate voluntarily. In fact, Pompeia, who's in the other corner, likes to voluntarily hop into a net for Melanie because of how good she is at positive reinforcement training. She's not stressed by it at all. So once they come into this secondary space, it's really easy to convince them to come back inside with us and come in where it's nice and warm on the cold days, or if we have hurricane weather or something coming through. And you can see Francesca here is snacking away. She's got peanuts in the shell, which are their absolute favorite. They love ripping open the shell so that they can get to the peanut. And she's not stressed at all that Melanie has shut her in here. And she's not stressed at all. And she's very graciously letting me film her right there as well. And so you can see this practicing lockup is really effective. They get their favorite treats when they do it. We can tell from the body language, this is a very relaxed lemur. An unhappy, not relaxed lemur is pretty obvious. You know, a lot of hopping and bouncing, probably some vocalizations, which you wouldn't be able to hear on this video. Ears might be pinned, face might be scrunched up, kind of the general signs when an animal isn't happy. And right now we see a lemur that's very relaxed, casually glancing around, snacking away. The tail is kind of flopped over to the side. So she definitely is not bothered at all by practicing lockup and is more interested in her peanuts. So lemurs do have to learn how to free range, which sounds kind of ridiculous because they're lemurs. They should know how to be in the forest. But the lemurs here haven't always grown up in the forest, especially our baby lemurs. We need to make sure that they're really safe and that we make sure they have the best chance at thriving when they're little. And that means keeping them and mom inside a nice, cozy area without anything to bother them when the baby's really small. And so babies usually spend about the first month and a half of their life with mom, getting introduced to the rest of the family slowly, growing nice and big and strong so we know they can cling really well to mom. And then when they're big enough, they start free ranging with mom. So this is a video of Lee and her son Brady. Brady's also a year old now. So if you were to go out into this forest during warm weather this year, you would see a lemur who's almost as big as mom. They grow so quick. But you can see Brady rides on mom a little different. He kind of rides like a little fanny pack or a belt. He kind of wraps around her middle. And that's more common for the lemurs that walk on all fours, the quadrupedal lemurs, which is most of the other lemurs. And so you can see mom's eating and chomping away, and Brady is sitting here, kind of watching me, exploring, but very safe, kind of using mom as his shield and using mom as his mode of transportation for the most part. This is my favorite stage of baby lemur, when they just have these big wide eyes watching around, and they're kind of helpless to determine where they're going as mom hops around and leaps all over the place. And because we didn't get to go out into the forest today, I wanted to show you at least one lemur group that is currently out in our forest and one baby lemur that we currently have. So this is Felix, and I took this last week. So Felix is still very small. He's, I think, about 2 or 3 months old. I should know that answer, but I will look it up. But he's about 2 or 3 months old. So he's just at the stage where he's getting more independent. He's playing a little bit more. He's hopping on and off of mom, and he's learning how to move, but he's still a little awkward and he doesn't always stick his landing. So I'll show you what I mean. You can watch Felix exploring while his mom, Lupicina, or Loopy, we call her Loopy, is just snacking away here. Right there, she has a piece of food in her hand called folivore chow. So that's for leaf-eating primates. That's a piece of chow that's specially made for her. And you can see Felix is really feeling very exploratory today. He's feeling very brave today. He's also nibbling at mom's feet and trying to get her attention. So that whole mom, pay attention to me thing is present throughout the animal kingdom. So he's trying to get her attention and show off. He just did a great vertical leap where he leapt horizontally, keeping his body nice and vertical. He's starting to nibble on mom's food. He's learning what to eat based on what mom's eating. So you can really see that he's figuring out the world, but he's not the most coordinated. He's a little bit wobbly. All right, so that was my whirlwind of what it's like for the lemurs out in the forest. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions for everyone. So I am going to end with that and go to questions.
Fantastic. Well, Megan, what fun as always. Thank you so much for the rapid fire presentation. We learned so much together. The feedback's been tremendous on YouTube. And all our classes joined us live. You guys all joined at the last 10 seconds before we got underway. So welcome in to Miss Krinsky, Miss Ellswick, Miss O, Miss Wallach, Miss DeCoster, and Miss Wells Coldfield's class. So nice to have you guys all in. We're going to dive in with Q&A. So if you're on YouTube, we have over 13 full other classrooms on YouTube, Megan. So it's a crazy full house today, well over 350 kids joining us. If you're on YouTube, share questions in the chat bar. What we're going to do first is take a question from Miss DeCoster. Her devices aren't working today live, but she did want to ask, let's see, have you ever found a hurt lemur in the forest when you're going through and you're doing these activities? Is there ever any situation where a lemur's not doing well out in the woods?
Yeah, that has happened. Thankfully, it's very rare. Here in the forest in North Carolina, there's not much that threatens the lemurs. There's no natural predators of lemurs here that can get into the forest. We make sure that things like bobcats or coyotes can't get in. The same fence blocks them, and we have what's called a dig barrier, so fence is buried under the ground. We have found hurt lemurs before, and the way we find them is because we have that routine where we see the lemurs every morning, they come for breakfast, and if they don't come for breakfast, we look at the weather, we give it a little time. Sometimes the lemurs won't come right away for breakfast because it's a little chilly and rainy and they're busy snuggled up with their family, staying warm and sleeping. Sometimes the lemurs don't come for breakfast because it's acorn season in the fall and they're busy eating all the acorns they can get in their belly, and the food we're giving them isn't as exciting anymore. But we give it a little time, we check their favorite spots to hang out in the forest, and then if it's been an hour and we still haven't had any lemurs show up, we use those radio collars. So that's when we get our little tracker out and we hear a ping, a noise that gets louder as we get closer to the lemur that we're tracking. And we usually have that collar on the dominant female. Sometimes we have it on more than one lemur in the group, but we know the family hangs out with the dominant female. So if we can't find them, we know we can find them looking for her. And then we can usually find them snuggled up in a tree, 60, 80 feet up, staying warm, just not bothering to come down. Occasionally, we have found a lemur that was hurt. One example, years before I got here, is a lemur named Tiberius, who was a cockerel shafak. So he was that white and brown lemur who hops through the trees on 2 feet. And he managed to fall and break his leg while he was out there. So the vets here took care of him. They put him back together. I think he got like a kind of titanium kind of rod and screw thing put in his leg. And he recovered, and the next year he was able to go out and free range again. But then, unfortunately, he was found fallen again, and he had injured his leg again. So that lemur got his free ranging privileges restricted because we couldn't trust him to be out in the forest and not fall. That's really rare, though. Most lemurs are really coordinated. We don't have to worry about it. Most of the time, we can find the lemurs no problem. But yes, we have found them hurt before, and that's why it's great to have 2 full-time veterinarians here to take care of them.
Yeah, I think that's the first time that question's ever been asked, so thank you for that story. I also picture the squirrels of the North Carolina forest just appalled that lemurs are eating their acorns, so thank you for that. Miss Wells Corfield's class joining us in Montpelier, Virginia. If you guys have a question for us, come on up, take us away. Hi, guys.
Okay, what's your question? What's your question? Very louder. My question is
Don't be shy.
So he wants to know, do you ever pet your lemurs?
That's a great question. I love getting that question. So no, we do not pet lemurs because our lemurs are wild animals, and the animals that make the best pets are domesticated animals like dogs or cats. And so we have to remember when we're working with lemurs, especially because they're so cute and they look so cuddly, that they are still wild animals, no matter how much they look like something we want to snuggle. So I think it's great when we're excited about animals. And I was a kid who had a bunch of stuffed animals and liked to snuggle them. But we have to remember that the animals don't always want to be snuggled. So we have to make sure we don't pet the wild animals.
I actually think it's a really important message when we get in a lot of our conservation programs is people will go on vacations to places where there'll be a chance to put a monkey or a parrot or some sort of creature on your shoulder. Don't do those things and don't share those pictures. That's actually not something that's really helpful for animals. It often leads to some really bad scenarios for the wild animals in those regions. So it's really important to be able to appreciate and love animals at a place like the Duke Lemur Center, like a zoo or aquarium that's well maintained and well run. But if you have those sort of animal interactions with creatures you might not think want to be touched, probably stick on the side of caution and avoid those sort of things. Great question, guys. Megan, I just noticed too that you have your screen share up. I don't know if you can see us, but if you want to exit screen share so you can see us, go for it. Miss Krinsky's class, they're joining us in Maple, Ontario. We've got a lot of delightfully named towns today. So Miss Krinsky, if you want to unmute your microphone, come on in and share those questions. Go for it. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
I wonder if I could screen share because we're doing virtual. So I wonder if I could screen share my class with you guys, but
you can. If you want to try that, go for it. But if you want to just share your question, either way works.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do that. So, so the question that one of our students had was, why do the lemurs have big eyes?
Miss F, you're on mute.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So some lemurs have big eyes because they are nocturnal. So they are going to be active most at night. So animals like the mouse lemur or the eye. Other lemurs are going to be active sometimes at night and sometimes during the day. That's called cathemeral. So that is a special type of characteristic where the lemurs can basically choose based on the season. So let's say predators are more active where they are in the summer months. Maybe they might be more nocturnal because they can avoid the predators, or maybe food is more plentiful at night because it's not as hot out or something like that. And then there are other lemurs who are diurnal like us. The lemurs who are diurnal like us, I don't have a good answer for why they have big eyes. And that might be because I personally don't know the answer, or it might be because we in the scientific community don't know the answer. So that's a great example of something that if we as a scientific community don't know the answer, it's a great subject for somebody to study one day. You can even come out here.
Yeah, Miss Krinsky, your students could be the ones that answer that question and we'll come to you for future broadcasts. So great question, guys. Miss Ellsworth's class, welcome in. You guys are joining us literally, like, I guess, down the hallway from our group at Miss Wells Corfield's class. So come on in, unmute that mic, and go for it. Unmute the mic first. The classic video broadcast fun. Take it, don't trip, all good. Hi.
Hi. So are all the lemurs from Africa? Like, where do they come from?
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm going to answer that two ways. So lemurs in general as a species are all found on Madagascar. And we think the way that lemurs got there is that their ancestors, who were lemur-like very small primates, were probably carried over in a rafting event from mainland Africa. So that means that the lemurs didn't build a little raft. It means that they were sleeping or maybe even hibernating in some vegetation, some trees, something like that. And then a big cyclone came through and it was so intense that it probably ripped off a chunk of vegetation, especially on the coastal habitat. And that vegetation formed a natural raft, and the lemurs were carried over and happened to make it to the island of Madagascar. That's also how we think primates got to South America, actually, is crossed the entire Atlantic Ocean. So Madagascar doesn't seem like that big of a trip on a raft when you think about it. When it comes to the lemurs who live here, the individual lemurs who live here, all of the original lemurs came over from Madagascar from the wild, and the reason they were brought over is to establish a genetic safety net so that while we work on conservation in Madagascar, we can make sure we keep healthy genetics and healthy lemurs living here so that one day if we can restore enough habitat that there's more places for lemurs to live, we could put a new line of lemurs out there and keep the genetics really healthy for everyone living out there. Almost all of the lemurs here at the Duke Lemur Center today were born here or at another zoo or facility that we work with. So it's part of a conservation breeding program. We do have a couple exceptions to that. One of my favorite lemurs here is an Ai named Andorra, and she's about 37 years old. So she actually was brought over from Madagascar, and she's a very elderly lady now, probably well beyond what she would have lived to in the wild. But the last time we brought lemurs from the wild was 1992, so not very many from the wild remain.
Yeah. My birthday, my birth year when you brought the lemurs. How exciting. There you go, guys. Let's go to Miss O's class, joining us in Fergus, Ontario. Unmute your mic, Miss O, and then we'll head to Miss Wallach's in a minute before we go to YouTube. Come on in.
Hi there. We're virtual as well, and I think I can share my classroom really quickly. We did, if I do have a question, but I wonder if I could just quickly tag on to the eye question. One of our students was wondering, oh, I'm already presenting, so I don't think I can show you. I can't do that.
No.
Anyway, sorry about that. But one of our students was wondering if there was a reason why their eyes were yellow. So that was the one thing. But then the other question we had was, why are lemurs considered one of the most endangered species in the world? And then also, on the other hand, being Earth Day today, do you have a message that you would like to send out to the next generation about conservation of species for us? Thank you.
Big question. I like it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jesse, I'm going to need you to help me keep track to make sure I don't miss any of those. So
okay.
I'll start at the top. So for the eyes, we saw a lot of lemurs with yellow eyes today. Some lemurs have green eyes. Some lemurs' eyes are more like an amber color or more brown. And there's even a lemur species called the blue-eyed black lemurs who are blue-eyed, as you would guess. So lemur eye color is determined by the same thing that human eye color is determined by, which is our genetics and what's dominant and what's recessive in the genes. And so if anyone here has done those Punnett squares, you're familiar with this. And if you aren't yet, you're getting there. So basically, in blue-eyed black lemurs, the recessive gene, or the gene that's less dominant, less likely to show up, is the one that is present in all of the blue-eyed black lemurs, is my understanding of it. And in other lemurs, you have more dominant eye colors. I don't know if we know why they have yellow eyes versus why they have blue eyes. Sometimes it's because there's a specific advantage, and that's why it persisted through evolution. So think about things like having a tail to balance with. That's really helpful, so you'd understand why that sticks around as lemurs are evolving. Other times, maybe it's just a trait that didn't give them an advantage, but also didn't give them a disadvantage, so it just stuck around. So I'm not sure where eye color fits in that. The next question, I know we asked about conservation.
Yeah, before that, so lemurs, why are they so endangered? What's the deal with that? Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a couple of reasons. One is that lemurs make up 20% of all of the primate species in the world. So if you look at all the primates in the world, 1 in 5 of those species is going to be a lemur, and they're all only found on the island of Madagascar. Madagascar is an island that's located in a mostly tropical climate. So that is an area of the world where biodiversity is really threatened. You have the most biodiversity in the areas around the equator, where you have these really diverse habitats in these really warm tropical climates. And then those areas are also the most susceptible to climate change. So islands in tropical areas are already under a lot of pressure in terms of conservation needs. And then on top of that, in Madagascar, you have a very large population of people. And this gets really complicated, so I'll try to give you the bare bones version, but the people in Madagascar, there's about 25 million or so living in Madagascar, and most of them are living on our equivalent of, say, like a couple of US dollars a day. And a lot of those people are just farming for their families or providing for their families. But when you have such a large population of people on an island, you have a limited amount of resources. And so people trying to feed their families need the land to feed their families and do what's called slash and burn agriculture, which is a traditional method which can be very effective if you can rotate and use different parts of your land. But with a giant population and needing to feed your family, the slash and burn agriculture has slowly depleted the soil in a lot of Madagascar from its nutrients. And so you have this push and pull between the people of Madagascar trying to provide for their families and lemurs needing that habitat and that forest to survive. So We work on the ground in Madagascar with the Malagasy people. And I think my most important message about conservation is we have to remember that conservation does not mean only protecting animals, non-human animals who live in a habitat, or only making sure we have large chunks of forest protected. When we go to a place like Madagascar, we're going to somewhere where people have lived for thousands of years, where their families have lived for generations. And those people may care about the forest, they may care more about their family, just like some of us care more about the environment than other people do. But we have to remember that the people living in a place are not our enemy. That is still their home, that is their land. So we're there to help them. We are there to work with them and to lift up the Malagasy people who want to do their own conservation research or who want to do their own environmental education research. So the biggest thing that people don't realize about conservation is that it is a field where you work with people and you include people in your approach rather than coming in and telling someone how to use their land or what they might be doing wrong, in your opinion.
Yeah. Community conservation has become the biggest part of what we feature as an organization at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and pretty much no organization does this better than the Duke Lemur Center. So at the end of the broadcast, I will link in the website so you can find out more of what they do. If you check out our YouTube channel at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, there's a bevy of 30 plus broadcasts on this very topic. So if you guys want to follow up and learn more, it's a really, really great story to tell. We're going to go to Miss Wallach's class now in Arlington. We have so many Virginians today. It's so exciting. I think it's the most Virginians we've ever had. So Miss Wallach will come to you next, and then we'll try and field one or a few of our literally, I think, gazillion YouTube questions that have come in over the last 30 minutes. So Ms. Wallach, unmute that microphone, and then you're good to go.
Hi, thank you so much for having us today. We have 2 questions. Kylie, go ahead.
What is your favorite part of your job?
And Bennett.
What do lemurs do when they're not in trees?
Okay, 2 excellent questions. So my favorite part of my job is, I know it's going to sound cheesy, but it's actually this. Most of my job as the manager is kind of boring paperwork stuff and scheduling stuff, and I really love teaching people about animals. My friend, when I was very young, jokingly told me that I was an encyclopedia of useless animal information. And what I like to tell her now is that turns out that's a job. So joke's on her. So that's my absolute favorite part of my job. So thank you guys for tuning in and letting me do it. And the second question about what lemurs do when they're not in the trees, that depends a little on the type of lemur. Some lemurs might pretty much never come down from the trees at Madagascar. They might spend almost their entire life up in the trees because that's where they feel safe and where they have their homes. Other lemurs, like the ring-tailed lemurs, spend about half their time on the ground, and they're usually going to spend that time moving and foraging and socializing with each other. Lemurs don't usually sleep on the ground. They're going to want to sleep where they feel the most comfortable and safe, so they usually will only sleep when they're up in the trees.
Great question. When I was a kid, I was quiz kid and knew all the useless animal information too. And Megan and I have like the coolest jobs in the world. So if you're the nerdiest kid in your class, keep with that because there's some pretty cool stuff out there. I'm going to go to YouTube for a few quick questions. Time flies when you're having fun. We're at 39 minutes already. Mr. Glassford asked a question which I love. Why does a wet nose help them smell better?
That's a great question. And part of the answer to that is wet-nosed versus dry-nosed is kind of the common way that we describe the rhinarium, which is the wet nose, versus the dry nose. So strepsirrhine is the wet-nosed primate. Haplorhine would be dry-nosed, which includes us. Basically, whether the nose is wet or not also correlates to how many sensory receptors we have and how the nose is built to receive scent. So it's kind of how much energy is put into that area of your senses versus how much energy is put into other areas of your senses. We're getting a little bit out of my knowledge and expertise realm, so I don't know if I have a more satisfying answer than that. So I'm going to give my favorite answer, which is I don't fully know.
Okay, go to Google. That's a great follow-up for everybody. All right, one more from YouTube. Ms. Monk's class, are there other research stations like yours in other parts of the world?
So there are definitely other research facilities and other people doing research in various parts of the world. There is nothing quite like the Duke Lemur Center, which is my favorite thing about working here. We have the most diverse population of lemurs outside of Madagascar. We have over 200 lemurs living here in Durham, North Carolina, and we've been here since 1966. So we have a lot that makes us extremely unique. that you wouldn't find anywhere else. But there are lots of other places doing conservation or doing research, non-invasive research. It's really rare to find a place like the Duke Lemur Center that does the research, has the animals, does the conservation work, and also does the education. That's my favorite thing about working here, is that if I have a question about conservation, I just can go to the person who works on the other side of the building. If I have a question about our animal care, that person's right over there. So we do it all here at the Lemur Center, which is a really unique thing. Usually you have one or two components, not all of that together.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. Always such a pleasure to get to chat with you guys as a team. And I know that some of our classes might need to go in a minute, so I want to make sure that everyone has this link up on the bottom of the screen, lemur.duke.edu, if you want to find out more about the amazing work that they do in the lemur forest, in conservation in Madagascar, and more. That is a fantastic resource to keep those answers coming. Let's try and take another question from every group. We might go a little over time. That's okay. Miss Wells, Corfield's class, if you guys want to kick us off, and we'll come to Miss Krinsky in just a minute. So Wells, Corfield, hi, fifth graders. Everyone's got their hands up. It's the best problem to have. Hi.
Why do the lemurs jump a whole bunch, like when they're on the ground?
Why are they always jumping from the ground?
Yeah.
That's a great question, and it might depend on the lemur in the exact moment when they jump up from the ground. But as I mentioned earlier, they're usually not on the ground. Most of their time, they're going to spend up in the trees, and that's because the lemurs are really agile in the trees. If you're a cockerel shafak, you saw in that video when they were leaping between the trees, it was almost like they were a dancer performing in like a ballet. They were so coordinated; they could leap from side to side. Of course, Felix wasn't that coordinated yet, but he's only a couple months old. But all the other lemurs, they just move more gracefully. They're more sure-footed up in the trees. So it's kind of like if I weren't sure about something and I wanted to feel safe, I probably wouldn't climb up in a tree. That's not where I'm going to feel the most comfortable. If I think a bear is coming after me and I want to get away, my best bet's probably not climbing up a tree, especially if it's a black bear, because they can just climb up after me much faster than me. I'm going to be most comfortable probably on the ground running, because that's where I spend most of my life. That's where I feel the most sure-footed. Lemurs spend most of their life up in the trees. They're adapted to survive in the trees. So that's where they're going to feel the most sure-footed. So that's where they're going to feel the most at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. Miss Krinsky's class, unmute that mic, come on back in and share another with us.
Hi, give me 1 second. Let me just see if they can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Oh. Okay, sorry, I just had to unmute myself.
No worries.
So one of the questions were, if a lemur's mom passed away, how would the baby go on its own, or would it be kept inside of the center?
Yeah.
That was one of the questions.
Okay, so I think this question probably related to when we had the footage of the lemurs out in the forest, and I was talking about the lemurs learning to free range with mom. So if it's a lemur mom that is free ranging and the baby is with mom, it depends on how old the baby is, what exactly we would do. If the baby were still really young, just learning to move out in the forest, that baby and the rest of their family that they have would come back inside probably while the baby learned and readjusted. And we would probably just take a moment to see what's happening with the family. Lemurs are individuals, just like people can be individuals. So sometimes you might see that dad kind of fills that role and the baby spends more time with dad. Dad really wants to be involved usually with baby lemurs, but mom usually is so protective that she tells him to get away and not to play so much. So that might happen. Or an older sibling, an older sister, maybe will step in and baby will ride around more with older sister. If the baby's older, let's say somewhere between 9 and 12 months old, almost up to a year old, that baby's probably getting pretty independent and they're probably going to be able to continue free ranging with the rest of their family. But in the really unfortunate cases where we have had lemurs pass away, we always have to take a moment to just evaluate the family unit, evaluate the troop and see what they're doing, and then kind of adjust based on each case.
Yep. Great question, guys. And again, we've had a whole bunch we've never had before, so I really appreciate our teachers today. All right, Miss Ellswick, Miss O, Miss Wallach, in that order. Let's see if we can do 3 more great questions. Miss Ellswick, come on in.
Thank you. How can you tell which kind of lemur is which kind?
And then one other one real quick.
How about me? How long do they live up to?
her lifespan?
Because they don't.
Okay, so you guys have great questions, but they're all slightly long answers because lemurs are so different. So how to tell different lemurs apart. So it sounded like you were talking about species, but I'll talk about both. So it depends on the species. Some mouse lemurs look exactly the same when you look at them, but genetically we can tell they're different, or they might live in totally different regions of Madagascar. Others, like the ring-tailed lemurs that are gray with the black and white stripes on their tail, look very different than the two-footed cockerel shafak towering over them and hopping around. So it depends. And when it comes to individual lemurs, that's a whole nother ballgame. Sometimes the males and females are different colors, like in blue-eyed black lemurs. That makes it easier. But other times, I can't really tell them apart until somebody who takes care of them every day tells me, oh, this one has this on their nose, or this one has ears that go a certain direction. And the second question was...
Oh, sorry, I'll come back in. We had, life expectancy, and we had, yeah, there you go.
So life expectancy depends on the lemur. Really small lemurs, like mouse lemurs in the wild, usually maybe 5 or 6 years is a good long life, depending on where they live. Here at the Lemur Center, where they get kind of pampered and spoiled, it's more like 12 or 13 years is a nice long life. If you look at a larger lemur, like say a ring-tailed lemur or a red-ruffed lemur, they're going to live longer in the wild, usually into their 20s, maybe their 30s, depending on the region that they live in. And here they can live into their 30s as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys. All right, Miss O, unmute that mic, and Miss Wallach, we're coming to you next to wrap us up.
So just a couple of questions, please. So the first one is, what's their favorite food in the wild? And then also, what do you think is the most interesting thing about lemurs? And do you have any fun stories from your interactions with them?
Okay, so the food in the wild, again, really depends on the lemur. My favorite lemur, the eye, eats mostly insect larvae or grubs that they dig out of tree trunks. Other lemurs, like the red-ruffed lemurs, eat mostly fruit. Other lemurs, like the cockerel shafak, eat mostly leaves. I would really encourage, if you're really curious about their diets, if you go to our website that Jessie linked, you can actually, we have information on the different species. You can also look all kinds of stuff up on, like, say, IUCN, or other websites. And the second question was about fun stories or favorites. And I'd say, oh gosh, it's really hard to narrow it down, but my personal favorite thing about being around the lemurs that most people don't realize is that older lemurs or geriatric lemurs are really, really fun. Babies are cute, but I like the really old lemurs because they get really distinct personalities, and we often pair them with different species. So we have sometimes an elderly ring-tailed lemur who doesn't get along with their family group anymore because they're a little too old, who might live with, say, another type of lemur. So we've had a mongoose lemur, and they look like just a cute little odd couple who groom each other and snuggle each other, even though they wouldn't interact at all in the wild.
How neat is that? Ms. Wallach's class, come on in. Thank you guys so much. I know some of our classes have had to leave for lunch, so I appreciate everyone for sticking around. Unmute that mic and wrap us up.
How many lemurs do you have, and do you have a favorite one?
Great question to close out on. So here at the Lemur Center, we have over 200 individual lemurs living here, and we even have a few bush babies. We actually have lesser bush babies, which are the smaller 6-inch tall ones. And we have 13 different species of lemur. My favorite lemur is definitely the eye, which is a really cool nocturnal lemur that you should definitely check out. And you spell it just like you would say, like, aye, Captain. So it's really easy to spell. And then my favorite individual lemur, You might get
the rest of them if you pick an individual one. Like if they watch this broadcast later, they might.
I know, yeah. When we stream it in their enclosures, you know what? I'll go with Endora, our 37-year-old eye, because she's just really great.
I think the other lemurs will be okay with that, so we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Megan. This is always such a pleasure, and for pulling your presentation together like this amidst this cold snap in the forest. So I really appreciate it. Our classes loved it. For our easily 400 kids. We had more classes join us afterwards in Texas, across Ontario, and more. So welcome in, everybody. And yeah, Miss O and Miss Wallach, what we do at the end of every broadcast, I'm going to bring you guys in to join me in saying a big thank you and farewell to Megan. Come on in. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.